Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Victoria warns Kyle of Claire's alluring invitation to Los Angeles. While Victoria Newman cautions Kyle Abbott about his next move, Claire Newman will get an alluring invitation to Los Angeles. Kyle keeps saying and doing the wrong thing since he's been in a desperate attempt to make amends with Claire. Kyle continues to put pressure on Claire and exacerbate the situation rather than allowing her the time and space she needs to work through all of this. Victoria will give Kyle some counsel that he didn't ask for in Tuesday's YNR episode. Victoria will feel compelled to offer her opinion on what's best for Claire, whether Kyle wants to hear it or not. Victoria might let Kyle know that his actions will only make Claire more distant. Victoria can contend that arguing with Holden Novak will only push Claire closer to him if Kyle complains about him. Claire will confide in Holden about her desire for a respite from Genoa City's drama in the interim. That will give Holden the notion to invite Claire to accompany him on his business trip to Los Angeles. Holden would argue that there's nothing wrong with two friends going on a quick trip to Los Angeles together, despite Claire's misgivings and concerns that it would be improper. Holden will put a lot of effort into persuading Claire of this, but Kyle will not be happy until he learns of his new rival's offer from Los Angeles. They're going to brainstorm their future with Audra Charles and Sally Spector. Sally will inform Audra that Abbott Communications is no longer in existence and hold Billy Abbott accountable for ruining all of their goals. However, Sally and Audra might decide against hosting a self-pity party. Audra and Sally will conduct a strategy session since it would be wiser to move forward with creating some new job paths. Furthermore, Audra will ultimately choose to approach Nate Hastings once more about rekindling their romance, but her dream for a reunion will not be fulfilled. Victoria Newman had always prided herself on being able to see 3 steps ahead of everyone else in her family and the Genoa City power circles, and when it came to her niece Claire Newman, she wasn't about to let Kyle Abbott bulldoze his way into making things worse than they already were. Kyle, in his increasingly desperate attempts to reconcile with Claire after their rocky misunderstandings, kept saying all the wrong things, pressing too hard, and reminding Claire of every reason why she had sworn to herself that she needed space, but Kyle couldn't seem to help himself, as though the more she pulled back, the harder he clung, and Victoria, who had seen this self-sabotaging pattern play out before in both business and love, knew she needed to intervene even if Kyle hadn't asked for her counsel, even if her words might sting, because the last thing Claire needed was another man suffocating her with guilt-laced apologies and declarations when she was still trying to find her own balance in the chaos of Newman family politics, so Victoria pulled Kyle aside with that sharp, deliberate calmness she inherited from Victor himself and told him flat out that his constant need to press Claire for forgiveness was only widening the gap between them, warning him that if he didn't change course and give Claire the breathing room she craved, he would lose her for good, and if that weren't enough of a warning, Victoria added that every time Kyle picked a fight with Holden Novak, the mysterious man who had recently become Claire's confidant, he wasn't just blowing off steam, he was shoving Claire straight into Holden's arms. Because to a woman who had spent her life fighting for independence and peace, a man who defended her choices instead of challenging them was infinitely more attractive. Kyle, of course, bristled at the implication, his Abbott pride refusing to accept the idea that Holden could possibly be a rival worth worrying about, but as Victoria's words echoed in his head, Claire was confiding in Holden herself, admitting how exhausted she was by Genoa City's constant drama, by Kyle's relentless pursuit, and by the unending Newman-Abbott tensions that seemed to follow her everywhere, and Holden, ever the opportunist beneath his calm exterior, seized the moment to suggest a reprieve, offering her an escape in the form of his upcoming business trip to Los Angeles, presenting it not as a romantic getaway but as two friends slipping away from the suffocating weight of expectations, a chance to breathe different air, to remember that the world was bigger than Genoa City's constant whispers. Claire hesitated, of course, because she knew appearances mattered, that one wrong move could ignite a scandal she wasn't ready for, but Holden soothed her concerns with practiced ease, insisting that no one could find fault in two friends traveling together, assuring her that sometimes the healthiest thing a person could do was step away, and slowly. Against her better judgment, Claire began to see the allure in his proposal, while back in Genoa City, Kyle grew restless, sensing without being told that Holden was making moves he couldn't counter, until word of the Los Angeles invitation reached him and his frustration boiled into fury, for not only was he losing ground with Claire, but now another man was offering her everything he wasn't: freedom, laughter, escape. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, Sally Spectra and Audra Charles were busy confronting their own setbacks, realizing that Abbott Communications was officially dead in the water and laying the blame squarely on Billy Abbott's shoulders. But instead of wallowing in what might have been, Sally rallied Audra, insisting that their energy was better spent carving out new paths, brainstorming bold ventures rather than clinging to broken dreams, though Audra, ever restless in her personal life, still nursed the hope of rekindling her romance with Nate Hastings and eventually decided to take another shot at him, only to find her hopes dashed when Nate made it clear that whatever they once had was firmly in the past. Yet even as Sally and Audra plotted their professional rebirths and Audra faced another personal disappointment, the most electric tension hummed between Kyle, Claire, and Holden, with Victoria standing watch like a silent guardian, convinced that if Kyle didn't heed her warning, if he kept letting jealousy and desperation cloud his judgment, he would drive Claire straight into Holden's orbit and perhaps into Los Angeles for good, leaving Kyle to face the crushing reality that sometimes love couldn't be forced, that sometimes holding on too tightly meant losing everything. Victoria's warning might have sounded like tough love, but the undertone was genuine concern. She knew Claire well enough to understand that her niece wasn't the type of woman who would bend to pressure. Claire's entire journey since entering Genoa City had been about finding her identity, reclaiming her dignity after years of manipulation, and carving out her own place in a world full of power struggles and toxic expectations. The last thing she wanted was another man dictating her choices, and Victoria could see the writing on the wall. Kyle's desperate attempts to fix things weren't fixing anything, they were unraveling the fragile trust Claire had once been willing to extend. Victoria didn't enjoy playing the messenger, but she also wasn't about to stand by and watch Kyle destroy any chance he had left with Claire. "If you don't let her breathe, she'll suffocate, Kyle," Victoria told him with a steely edge, her voice carrying that trademark Newman authority. "And when she does, she won't just walk away, she'll run. And you'll have no one to blame but yourself." Kyle wanted to argue, wanted to lash out at Victoria for inserting herself where she wasn't wanted, but deep down, her words gnawed at him because they carried a truth he couldn't deny. Every attempt he had made so far had only widened the distance. Claire's silences had grown longer, her tone cooler, her eyes more guarded. He was losing her and, in his panic, only tightening the noose. What Kyle didn't know was that at that very moment, Claire was pouring her heart out to Holden Novak, explaining how Genoa City felt like a pressure cooker, how every corner of the town seemed haunted by drama she couldn't escape. Holden listened in that unflinching, attentive way that made him such a dangerous rival. He wasn't trying to fix her, wasn't throwing accusations or pleading for attention. He was simply present, validating her feelings, offering quiet solidarity. To a woman like Claire, who had known betrayal and manipulation, that kind of listening was intoxicating. It was in that moment of quiet confession that Holden dropped his offer with effortless timing. "Come with me to Los Angeles," he said with a casual smile, as though it were the simplest thing in the world. Claire blinked, startled. "Los Angeles?" she repeated, almost laughing at the absurdity. But Holden pressed gently, his tone light yet persuasive. He painted a picture of sunshine, ocean breezes, and anonymity, no Newman feuds, no Abbott pressure, no whispers about her past. Just freedom. "It's a business trip for me," Holden added, "but there's no rule saying you can't tag along. We'll keep it professional. Two friends taking a little break. Nothing more. Unless you want it to be." The ambiguity in his offer was deliberate, a masterstroke of manipulation cloaked in sincerity. Claire wavered. She knew how it would look. She could already hear Kyle's accusations, Victoria's suspicions, the gossip mill churning at lightning speed. But she was tired of defending her choices, tired of shouldering the weight of her family's mistakes, tired of Kyle's relentless pleas that left her feeling cornered instead of cherished. For the first time in months, the idea of leaving, even just temporarily, sounded like salvation. Holden sensed her hesitation melting and pressed harder, reminding her that sometimes the bravest choice was walking away from the noise. Back in Genoa City, Kyle's instincts screamed that something was shifting. Even before he got word of Holden's Los Angeles invitation, he felt it in Claire's demeanor, in the way she was slipping through his fingers. When he finally learned the truth, that Holden had invited her out of town, his fury ignited like wildfire. To Kyle, it wasn't just about Claire leaving. It was about another man stepping into the role Kyle believed was his to reclaim. He stormed around the Abbott mansion, railing at the injustice, but the more he ranted, the clearer it became that he wasn't thinking strategically. He was reacting emotionally, letting jealousy drive every move. Victoria saw it too. She knew that if Kyle confronted Claire in his current state, he would only push her further away. But Kyle couldn't seem to stop himself, much like his cousin Billy Abbott, who was notorious for self-sabotage when emotions ran high. In fact, Victoria even drew that parallel when she spoke to Kyle again. "You're acting like Billy right now," she warned. "And trust me, you don't want to go down that road. Claire doesn't need another Billy in her life. She needs stability. She needs space." But Kyle, blinded by his need to keep Claire close, wasn't sure he could heed the warning. Meanwhile, Sally Spectra and Audra Charles were locked in their own battle to stay relevant in Genoa City's cutthroat landscape. The death of Abbott Communications wasn't just a professional setback, it was a personal blow. Sally had invested her hopes in the venture, believing it would finally cement her as more than just a designer with a turbulent romantic past. Instead, she found herself pointing the finger at Billy, who had once again managed to derail something she had poured her heart into. Audra, on the other hand, refused to wallow. She might have been blindsided, but self-pity wasn't her style. She was already sketching out new strategies, new ventures that would allow her to bounce back stronger. Together, Sally and Audra decided that if they couldn't rebuild what was lost, they would create something even bigger. Their brainstorming sessions were fierce, filled with bold ideas and the kind of ambition that had always kept them dangerous players in the game. Still, Audra's personal life tugged at her. She couldn't shake her lingering feelings for Nate Hastings, the man who had once awakened a softer side in her. So, in a moment of weakness, or perhaps misplaced hope, she decided to reach out, testing the waters for a possible reconciliation. But Nate, still burned by their past and focused on his own goals, shut the door firmly, leaving Audra to swallow yet another disappointment. As Sally encouraged her friend to channel that heartbreak into their business plans, the contrast between their subplot and the Claire-Kyle-Holden triangle became clear. Sally and Audra were choosing reinvention, refusing to let setbacks define them, while Kyle was unraveling in real time, digging himself deeper into a hole he might never escape. And looming above it all was Victoria, watching silently, knowing that her warning might fall on deaf ears but unwilling to stop fighting for Claire's best interest. What Victoria feared most wasn't just Claire leaving for Los Angeles. It was what that trip represented. If Claire went, it wouldn't just be a getaway. It would be a turning point, a declaration that she was choosing independence over Kyle, choosing freedom over obligation. And if she bonded with Holden during that trip, Kyle's worst fears would come true. The rivalry would no longer be theoretical. It would be real, and it would be personal. The stage was set for heartbreak, betrayal, and reinvention. Kyle had a choice to make: heed Victoria's advice and step back, or keep pressing until Claire slipped away entirely. But if history was any indication, Kyle's emotions might blind him to reason, leading him down the same destructive path that had claimed so many before him. And if that happened, Genoa City would once again find itself consumed by the fallout of a love triangle no one saw coming, but everyone would be talking about. Holden Novak had always been patient, calculated, and subtle in his approach, and this was no different. He recognized the tension simmering between Claire and Kyle, and he knew that one wrong word from Kyle could push Claire completely into his orbit. The Los Angeles trip was a brilliant move in his eyes, not just a chance to spend time with Claire away from the suffocating eyes of Genoa City, but also a calculated way to deepen their trust, to create an environment where Claire could breathe freely, without Kyle's constant interruptions or pressures. Holden had mastered the art of offering escape without obligation, presenting the idea as completely platonic while knowing full well how powerful proximity and shared experiences could be in forging emotional bonds. He didn't need to force her, he only needed to create the circumstances where she would want to stay close to him of her own volition. Claire, meanwhile, was a whirlwind of emotions. On the one hand, she felt guilty for even considering leaving Kyle behind, knowing how much he was struggling and how deeply he cared for her. On the other hand, she recognized the suffocating reality of the situation. Every encounter with Kyle seemed to circle back to tension, frustration, and disappointment. He wanted her to forgive, to move forward, to act like everything was okay, but nothing felt okay to Claire, not when every interaction reminded her of past wounds, broken promises, and unspoken expectations. Holden's invitation, by contrast, felt like a breath of fresh air. For the first time in weeks, she could imagine herself somewhere else, somewhere she had control, somewhere the chaos of her family, Kyle, and Genoa City's constant gossip wouldn't weigh her down. Victoria, ever vigilant, watched these developments unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. She had given Kyle her warning, and now it was up to him whether he would listen. She knew Kyle's pride, his impulsive tendencies, and his deep-seated need to win Claire back could easily override reason. Yet she also knew that the longer he held on too tightly, the more likely he was to destroy any chance at reconciliation. The question that haunted her was simple but terrifying: would Kyle finally understand the lesson before it was too late, or would he push Claire into Holden's arms beyond the point of return? Kyle, unaware of the depth of Claire's conversations with Holden, continued to spiral. Every text he sent, every call he made, every attempt to see her in person only reinforced the distance between them. He didn't yet realize that Claire was actively considering leaving the city, and that Holden's offer was not just a casual suggestion but a direct challenge to Kyle's control over the situation. When he finally heard through mutual friends that Claire might accompany Holden to Los Angeles, rage, fear, and despair collided inside him. The notion that another man could step into the role he had once assumed, that someone else could offer Claire the freedom he couldn't, was almost too much for him to process. He wanted to storm into her life, demand explanations, and reassert his presence, but Victoria's warning echoed in the back of his mind: push too hard, and you'll lose her entirely. This inner conflict left Kyle paralyzed in some ways, yet volatile in others. He couldn't simply ignore the situation, and every moment he waited felt like a countdown to disaster. He reached out to friends, colleagues, and even family members, seeking advice, validation, or perhaps a way to regain control. But nothing calmed the storm inside him. The more he contemplated the Los Angeles trip, the more it became a symbol of everything slipping through his fingers: control, love, and the life he envisioned with Claire. Meanwhile, Claire wrestled with her own sense of loyalty. She wasn't heartless, she knew Kyle's intentions were genuine, even if misguided, but the truth was that she needed space. Holden, without pressing, understood this instinctively. He didn't rush her into decisions. Instead, he offered perspective, gentle nudges, and the subtle reassurance that leaving for Los Angeles wasn't an escape from responsibility but a chance to reclaim herself. To Claire, that distinction made all the difference. She wasn't abandoning anyone, she was choosing herself. And that, in the end, was exactly what Kyle didn't seem capable of understanding. Back in Genoa City, Sally Spectra and Audra Charles were executing their own master plan. They had quickly pivoted from mourning the collapse of Abbott Communications to constructing a new professional empire. It was no small task. Billy Abbott had left chaos in his wake, and the remnants of the once powerful media company were in disarray. But Sally and Audra refused to let his recklessness define their futures. They began meeting with potential partners, exploring new ideas, and identifying opportunities that others might have overlooked. Audra, despite the pang of personal disappointment with Nate Hastings, threw herself into the process with a fervor that reminded Sally why they had always made a formidable team. Their strategy sessions were intense, filled with debate, brainstorming, and the occasional clash of personalities. Sally's boldness complemented Audra's meticulous planning, creating a dynamic that was impossible to ignore. Together, they considered everything from launching a boutique media venture to offering consulting services to struggling businesses in Genoa City. Every new plan was weighed against potential obstacles, market risks, and their own capabilities, but they moved forward with a determination that mirrored the determination Kyle lacked.